The bridge of the TSS Defiant was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the gentle beeping of control panels. Admiral Jack Morrison stood near the main viewing window, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the endless darkness of space. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with the calm focus that came from years of training and discipline. Commander Lisa Hartwell approached him with a datapad in her hand. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had served under Admiral Morrison for 8 years, and she knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders. "Sir, the Zervani ambassador's ship has entered the neutral zone. They're requesting a communication channel." Admiral Morrison turned from the window. His face was weathered from decades of service, and his gray eyes held the weight of countless difficult decisions. "Open the channel on the main display." The large screen at the front of the bridge flickered to life, and the image of Ambassador Verketh appeared. He was a Zorvani, a reptilian species with golden scales that shimmered under the lights of his ship. His eyes were yellow with vertical black pupils, and when he spoke, a forked tongue darted between his sharp teeth. "Admiral Morrison," the ambassador said, his voice carrying a tone of superiority that made several crew members shift uncomfortably at their stations. "I bring a message from Emperor Kal the Undying, ruler of the Galactic Empire." Admiral Morrison remained still, his expression unchanged. "I'm listening." "The Emperor has observed your little Terran Federation with interest," Verketh continued. "Your species has spread to 40 star systems in just 300 years. This is impressive for such a young race. However, the Emperor believes it is time for your people to understand their place in the galaxy." Lieutenant Commander Chris Bennett, the ship's tactical officer, clenched his fists beneath his console. He was young, barely 30 years old, but he had heard enough stories about the Zervani Empire to know where this conversation was heading. And what place would that be? Admiral Morrison asked calmly. The ambassador smiled, revealing rows of pointed teeth. "The Galactic Empire has existed for 12,000 cycles. We have conquered 900 worlds. We have brought order to species that were destroying themselves with war and chaos. Your federation is strong for its age, but you are children compared to us. The Emperor offers you a choice." He paused, letting the silence stretch for dramatic effect. "Accept tributary status under the Empire. Pay tribute to the Emperor each cycle. Allow our ships to pass through your space freely. In return, you will receive our protection and the wisdom of our ancient civilization. Refuse, and you will face the consequences that every rebellious species has faced throughout our history." Commander Hartwell stepped closer to the Admiral, her voice low. "Sir, our intelligence suggests the Empire has over 10,000 capital ships. We have less than 200. Admiral Morrison nodded slightly, but kept his eyes on the screen. "Ambassador, I appreciate the Emperor taking time to consider our little federation. Let me offer a response that I hope will be equally clear." He stepped forward, and something in his posture changed. The calm, patient diplomat was gone. In his place stood a man who had survived humanity's darkest hours and emerged stronger. "The Terran Federation will not accept tributary status. We will not pay tribute to any foreign power. We will not allow any fleet to pass through our territory without our permission. And we will not kneel." Ambassador Verketh's eyes narrowed, his scales shifting color slightly in what Morrison recognized as anger. "You would refuse the Emperor's generous offer? Do you understand what you are doing, human? We have destroyed civilizations older and more powerful than yours. We have turned entire planets into burning wastelands. Your 40 little systems would fall within a single cycle." "Perhaps," Admiral Morrison replied, "but I don't think you understand what you would be facing." He gestured to Lieutenant Amy Chun, his communications officer. She was a small woman with quick hands and a brilliant mind for electronic warfare. She tapped several commands into her console, and a new display appeared beside the ambassador's image. It showed Earth, but not the blue and green planet of the present day. It showed Earth during the long dark, the 200 years of environmental collapse, nuclear war, and pandemic that had nearly ended humanity before the stars had ever been within reach. "This is what our homeworld looked like 400 years ago," Admiral Morrison said. Temperatures had risen until crops failed across entire continents. Wars were fought over fresh water and fertile land. Nuclear weapons were used 17 times. Plagues swept across populations already weakened by famine. At our lowest point, human population dropped to less than 1 billion. The images shifted to show ruined cities, empty wastelands, and desperate survivors fighting to stay alive. "We did this to ourselves," the Admiral continued. "And we survived. We rebuilt. We developed new technologies. We learned to work together because we had no other choice. And when we finally reached the stars, we carried with us every lesson those dark years had taught us." He stepped even closer to the screen, his voice dropping to something almost soft. "Ambassador, your empire has conquered species that surrendered when faced with superior numbers. You have defeated enemies who fought according to rules and traditions. But humanity has no such traditions. We fight dirty. We fight desperate. We fight like we're always on the edge of extinction because, for most of our history, we were." Ambassador Verkith was silent, his yellow eyes fixed on the human admiral. "So here is my message to Emperor Kal," Admiral Morrison said. "The borders of Terran space are absolute. Any ship that crosses those borders without authorization will be destroyed. Any fleet that threatens our colonies will face the full military response of Terran command. We will not start a war with your empire, but if you start one with us, we will finish it." The ambassador regained his composure, though something uncertain flickered in his eyes. Bold words from a small species. "The Emperor will be informed of your decision. I hope you do not come to regret it." "I hope the Emperor doesn't either," Admiral Morrison replied. The transmission ended. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Commander Hartwell let out a breath she had been holding. "Sir, do you think they'll actually attack?" Admiral Morrison turned back to the window, staring at the stars that humanity had fought so hard to reach. "Yes," he said quietly. "They will. They've never met a species that refused them. They won't be able to let it stand." He turned to face his crew. "Send a message to Fleet Command on Earth. Tell General Price that we need to accelerate the defense preparations. And tell him to wake up the deep stations." Lieutenant Chen's eyes widened. "Sir, the deep stations haven't been activated since the Titan incident." "I know," Admiral Morrison said. "But if the Empire is coming, we'll need everything we have. Humanity isn't going to kneel. Not to them. Not to anyone." The crew returned to their work with renewed purpose. Somewhere in the darkness of space, the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known was preparing for war against a species they believed to be weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 3 months passed after the meeting between Admiral Morrison and Ambassador Verkith. During that time, Terran Command worked without rest. Ships were built in orbital factories around Earth, Mars, and the industrial moons of Jupiter. Weapons were tested in secret facilities beyond the edge of the solar system. And deep in the cold darkness past Pluto, ancient stations that had been sleeping for decades began to wake up. Captain Daniel Cole commanded the TSS Vigilant, a patrol cruiser assigned to the Kepler Frontier. The Kepler Frontier was the edge of human space, a line of star systems that bordered the vast territory of the Zervani Empire. It was quiet duty most of the time. His crew spent their days running sensor sweeps and checking navigation beacons. But Captain Cole knew that quiet days were numbered. He was sitting in his command chair, reading a report about supply shipments, when Lieutenant Amy Chun's voice cut through the bridge. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on long-range sensors." Captain Cole set down his datapad and stood. He was a tall man in his 40s, with dark skin and a calm manner that put his crew at ease, even in difficult situations. "What do you have, Lieutenant?" Amy Chun was bent over her sensor console, her fingers moving quickly across the controls. Multiple contacts crossing the neutral zone. They're not broadcasting identification signals, but the energy signatures match Giovanni military vessels. The bridge went silent. Every officer understood what those words meant. "How many ships?" Captain Cole asked. Lieutenant Chen looked up, and for the first time since he had known her, Captain Cole saw fear in her eyes. 47 capital ships, sir. Destroyers, cruisers, and at least 12 heavy battleships. They're moving in formation toward Colony 7. Colony 7 was a farming world with 16 million people. Families, children, ordinary people who had left Earth to build new lives among the stars. Captain Cole felt his stomach tighten. "Send an emergency message to Terran Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha. Tell them the Empire has crossed the border." The message traveled through quantum relay stations, jumping from system to system at speeds faster than light. Within minutes, it reached Earth, where General Nathan Price was reviewing defense plans in the underground bunker that housed strategic operations. The general was an older man with white hair and a face lined by years of service. He had fought in 3 wars during his career, and he had hoped to retire without seeing a fourth. When Major Kate Sullivan handed him the alert from the Kepler frontier, he knew that hope was gone. "They actually did it," he said, staring at the tactical display that showed the enemy fleet moving deeper into human space. "They actually thought we were bluffing." Major Sullivan stood at attention beside him. She was young but experienced, with red hair pulled back in a tight bun and green eyes that showed no emotion. "Sir, we have 32 ships within range of Colony 7. The enemy outnumbers us significantly. Our projections suggest we would lose over 70% of our fleet in a direct engagement." General Price nodded slowly. "Then, we won't have a direct engagement." He turned to face her. "Authorize the Prometheus Protocol." The Major's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, the Prometheus Protocol hasn't been tested in actual combat. If it fails, we lose Colony 7 and 16 million people," the general interrupted. "If we do nothing, we lose the same. At least this way, we have a chance." He walked to a secure terminal and entered a code that only 5 people in the entire Federation knew. The screen displayed a simple message: "Prometheus Protocol authorized." Activation in progress. Across human space, things began to happen. On the edge of the solar system, massive stations hidden in the darkness powered up their engines. Their fusion reactors, cold for 20 years, burned hot again. Inside their metal shells, weapons that had never been fired prepared for their first taste of war dot in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Thousands of small satellites that looked like communication relays revealed their true nature. Panels slid open to show weapons barrels. Targeting computers came online. They were not satellites at all. They were weapons platforms hidden in plain sight, waiting for the day they would be needed dot and on every colony world. From the oldest settlements on Mars to the newest outpost at the edge of explored space, defense systems activated. Missile batteries rose from underground bunkers. Shield generators hummed with power. Evacuation procedures began for civilians in danger zones. Back on the Vigilant, Captain Cole watched the enemy fleet on his display. They were moving fast, faster than he had expected. At their current speed, they would reach Colony 7 in less than 18 hours. "Sir," Lieutenant Chun said, "I'm receiving a response from Terran Command. Admiral Morrison is bringing the main fleet. They'll arrive at Colony 7 in approximately 16 hours. Captain Cole did the math in his head. The Admiral would arrive 2 hours before the enemy. It would be close, dangerously close, but it might be enough. What are our orders? Asked Commander Tony Barnes, the ship's executive officer. He was a stocky man with a thick beard and a reputation for staying calm under fire. We're to fall back to Colony 7 and join the defensive formation, Captain Cole replied. But first, we're going to give our friends out there something to think about. He turned to his tactical officer. Ensign Parker, load torpedo tubes 1 through 6 with the new Mark 9 warheads. Let's see if those fancy Zervani shields can handle Terran engineering. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, the Vigilant had fired 6 torpedoes at the approaching fleet. The weapons shrieked across the darkness of space, their engines burning bright against the stars. The Zervani ships detected the attack and responded with defensive fire. Beams of energy lanced out, destroying 4 of the torpedoes before they reached their targets. But 2 got through. They struck a destroyer at the edge of the formation, and the explosions tore through its hull like paper. Captain Cole allowed himself a small smile. Get us out of here, huh? Maximum speed to Colony 7. The Vigilant turned and accelerated away from the enemy fleet. Behind them, the Zervani ships continued their advance, but now they knew something important. The humans were not going to surrender. They were going to fight. On the lead battleship of the Zervani fleet, Fleet Commander Verketh watched the human ship escape. He was the brother of Ambassador Verketh, and he had been chosen to lead this invasion because of his ruthless reputation. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career and had never lost a battle. Let them run, he said to his officers. They can gather whatever pathetic fleet they have. It will make our victory more complete when we crush them all at once. His officers hissed in agreement, their scales gleaming under the harsh lights of the bridge. Fleet Commander Verketh turned his yellow eyes toward the stars where Colony 7 waited. 16 million humans. 16 million new subjects for the Empire. Or 16 million corpses if they refused to submit. Either outcome was acceptable to him. What he did not know, what he could not have known, was that the humans were not preparing to defend Colony 7. They were preparing to turn it into a trap. And when the jaws of that trap closed, the Galactic Empire would learn a lesson it would never forget. The Zervani fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Colony 7 system. Fleet Commander Verketh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Claw, watching his tactical display fill with information about the human defenses. Scan results complete, his sensor officer reported. The humans have assembled 31 capital ships in orbit around the planet. They have also deployed what appear to be communication satellites throughout the system. Verketh's forked tongue flickered between his teeth. 31 ships against his 47. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. This would be easy. Open a channel to their flagship, he ordered. The screen flickered, and the face of Admiral Jack Morrison appeared. He looked calm, almost relaxed, as if he were attending a routine meeting rather than facing the largest invasion fleet in human history. Fleet Commander, Admiral Morrison said, I assume you're here to discuss surrender terms. Verketh laughed, a hissing sound that echoed through his bridge. Indeed I am, human. Surrender your fleet and your colony. Order your people to lay down their weapons. Do this, and the Emperor may show mercy. Admiral Morrison nodded slowly, as if considering the offer. That's very generous, but I'm afraid I have a different suggestion. And what would that be? Leave now, while you still can. The Zervani commander's laughter stopped. His yellow eyes narrowed, and his scales shifted to a darker color. You dare threaten me? You, with your pathetic little fleet? I have conquered species 100 times more powerful than yours. Maybe, Admiral Morrison replied. "But you've never fought humans." He leaned forward slightly, and his voice dropped to something cold and hard. "Activate the grid." Throughout the Colony 7 system, the communication satellites that the Zervani had dismissed began to change. Panels slid open across their surfaces. Weapons barrels emerged. Targeting lasers painted the enemy ships with invisible light. There were over 3,000 of these satellites, hidden in plain sight, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small warship. The first wave of energy beams struck the Zervani fleet before anyone could react. Ships that had been preparing for a standard space battle suddenly found themselves caught in a storm of directed energy and kinetic projectiles coming from every direction. 3 destroyers exploded in the opening seconds. A cruiser lost its engines and began drifting helplessly. A battleship's shields flickered and failed under the concentrated fire of dozens of weapons platforms. "What is this?" Verkis screamed, gripping the arms of his command chair. "Where are these attacks coming from?" "Everywhere, sir," his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. "They're coming from everywhere." Admiral Morrison watched the chaos unfold on his own display. The plan was working better than he had hoped. The Zervani had built their military doctrine around large fleet battles, ship against ship, honor and tradition guiding every engagement. They had never imagined an enemy that would scatter thousands of weapons platforms across an entire star system and use them to create a killing field. "All ships, advance," he ordered. "Engage the enemy at close range. Don't let them regroup." The Terran fleet moved forward, their weapons firing continuously. They targeted damaged ships first, finishing off vessels that had been crippled by the satellite grid. Explosions bloomed in the darkness of space like deadly flowers. Lieutenant Commander Chris Bennett piloted his fighter through the battle, weaving between burning wreckage and enemy fire. His squadron had been tasked with protecting the larger ships, but there were so many targets that they had become hunters instead of defenders. "Falcon 3. On your left," he called to his wingman. "I see them," came the response. Taking the shot. 2 Zervani fighters disappeared in balls of flame. On the surface of Colony 7, 16 million people watched the battle through news broadcasts and emergency displays. They saw the lights of explosions in the night sky. They heard the rumble of distant impacts. And they waited, hoping that the fleet would be enough to protect them. Flight Commander Laura Martinez coordinated the fighter squadrons from her position aboard the carrier TSS Resolution. She was a veteran of border skirmishes, but she had never seen anything like this. The Zervani were dying by the hundreds, their ships torn apart by weapons they had never expected. "All squadrons, focus fire on the enemy flagship," she ordered. "If we take out their commander, the rest might retreat." The Imperial Claw was the largest ship in the Zervani fleet, a massive battleship covered in golden armor that was supposed to be nearly indestructible. It had survived the initial attack better than most, its shields holding against the satellite fire. But now it faced the combined assault of the entire Terran fleet. Aboard the flagship, Fleet Commander Verkith watched his fleet being destroyed. 20 ships gone in less than an hour. His shields were failing. His weapons were running low on power. For the first time in his long career, he faced the possibility of defeat. "Sir, we should retreat," his first officer said. "We can regroup and return with a larger force." "No," Verkith snarled. "The Empire does not retreat from lesser species. Sir, if we stay, we die." Before Verkith could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The hull had been breached. Human soldiers were boarding. Major Scott Hayes led his Marine company through the corridors of the enemy flagship. They moved in tight formation, their weapons raised and ready. The Zervani crew they encountered fought back, but they were not soldiers. They were sailors, unprepared for close combat against trained human marines. "Push forward," Major Hayes ordered. "The bridge is 3 decks up." They fought their way through the ship, leaving a trail of defeated enemies behind them. When they finally reached the bridge, Fleet Commander Verketh was waiting for them with a ceremonial blade in his hand. "I am Verketh, commander of this fleet," he declared. "I challenge your leader to single combat." Major Hayes raised his rifle and shot the blade out of the Zervani's hand. "Humans don't do single combat," he said. "You're under arrest." The battle ended 4 hours later. Of the 47 Zervani capital ships that had crossed into human space, only 8 managed to escape. 39 were destroyed or captured. Fleet Commander Verketh was taken prisoner, the first Zervani military leader ever captured alive by an enemy force. The cost to humanity was significant. 9 ships had been lost. 4,000 sailors and marines had given their lives to protect Colony 7, but the colony itself was untouched. 16 million people were safe. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking out at the wreckage that filled the space around the planet. Bodies floated among the debris. Fires burned on crippled ships. It was a scene of terrible destruction, but humanity had won, and now the galaxy would know it. News of the defeat at Colony 7 spread across the Zervani Empire faster than anyone expected. Communication networks that had been built to celebrate conquests now carried reports of disaster. The mighty Imperial fleet, commanded by one of the Emperor's most trusted generals, had been destroyed by a species the Empire had dismissed as primitive on dozens of conquered worlds. Subjugated species watched the news in silence. Some felt hope for the first time in centuries. Others felt fear, wondering what the Emperor would do in response to this humiliation. But all of them understood that something had changed. The Empire was no longer invincible. On the throne world of Zorvax Prime, Emperor Kal the Undying sat upon his crystal throne and listened to the reports from his advisors. He was ancient even by Zervani standards. His scales faded to a dull bronze, his eyes clouded with age but still sharp with intelligence. He had ruled the Empire for 3,000 years. He had overseen the conquest of 400 worlds. And now, for the first time in his long reign, he faced an enemy that had defeated him. How is this possible? He asked, his voice echoing through the vast throne room. Fleet Commander Verketh had 47 ships. The humans had barely 30. "Explain to me how this happened." His military advisor, a young commander named Sarkoth, stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Divine Emperor, the humans did not fight according to any known doctrine. They scattered weapons throughout the star system, hidden as communication satellites. They attacked from all directions at once. Our ships were designed to fight in formation against other fleets. They were not prepared for this type of warfare." "Then our ships were weak," the Emperor said. "No, Divine Emperor. Our ships were strong. The humans were simply different. They do not follow rules. They do not fight with honor. They use every advantage, every trick, every deception available to them. They fight as if every battle is their last." Emperor Kal was silent for a long moment. Around him, his advisors waited nervously. They had seen the Emperor's anger before. They knew what happened to those who disappointed him. But instead of anger, the Emperor laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound that sent chills through everyone present. "Interesting," he said. "Most interesting. Perhaps we have finally found a worthy opponent." While the Emperor considered his next move, Admiral Jack Morrison was preparing a message of his own. The battle at Colony 7 had been a victory, but it was only one battle. The Empire had thousands of ships. They could send another fleet, a larger one, and try again. Humanity needed to make clear that such an attempt would be futile. He stood in the communications center of the Defiant, surrounded by technicians and officers. Communications Director Eric Palmer had set up equipment that would broadcast on every known frequency in the galaxy. The message would reach not only the Zorvani Empire, but every species capable of receiving signals from space. "Are we ready?" Admiral Morrison asked. "Yes, sir," Palmer replied. "When you give the word, your message will be transmitted to every corner of known space." The Admiral nodded. He had spent hours preparing what he wanted to say. The words needed to be perfect. They needed to be strong enough to make the Empire hesitate, but not so aggressive that they would force unnecessary conflict. They needed to inspire humanity's allies and warn humanity's enemies. He stepped in front of the recording device and began to speak. "This message is for Emperor Call, the Undying, and the Galactic Empire. 3 months ago, your ambassador came to us with an offer. Join the Empire as a tributary species or face destruction. We refused. You did not believe us. Today, the wreckage of your fleet drifts in the void around Colony 7. Let this serve as a reminder." He paused, letting the words sink in. Humanity did not ask for this conflict. When we first reached the stars, we came seeking knowledge. We hoped to find friends among the other species of the galaxy. We hoped to trade, to learn, to grow alongside civilizations older and wiser than our own. But we also came prepared to defend ourselves. Admiral Morrison's expression hardened, and his voice grew colder. "Our history has taught us hard lessons. We have faced extinction before. We have walked through fires that would have destroyed lesser species. We have survived plagues, wars, famines, and disasters that killed billions of our people. And each time, we emerged stronger. We learned that survival requires sacrifice. That freedom requires vigilance. That peace must sometimes be defended with violence." Behind him, the officers of the Defiant listened in respectful silence. Many of them had lost friends in the battle. Many of them had family on Colony 7. They understood the weight of every word their admiral spoke. "To the Empire, I say this. Your fleet was destroyed because you underestimated us. You believed that numbers alone would bring victory. You believed that a young species could not stand against ancient power. You were wrong. Every colony under our flag is protected by the full military strength of Terran Command. Every station, every ship, every citizen. That protection is absolute." Admiral Morrison leaned closer to the recording device, his gray eyes burning with intensity. "Do not test us again. Do not send another fleet to our borders. Do not threaten our people. If you do, we will not simply defend ourselves. We will ensure that no one ever threatens humanity again. We have the will. We have the weapons. And we have nothing left to lose." He straightened and delivered the final words of his message. "To the other species of this galaxy, those who live under the Empire's rule and those who remain free, know this. Humanity stands ready to defend not only ourselves, but anyone who seeks freedom from tyranny. We will not bow. We will not submit. We will not surrender. The borders of Terran space are sacred, and they will be defended to the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath." He paused one final time. "This is Admiral Jack Morrison of Terran Command. This is our final warning." The recording ended. Director Palmer confirmed that the message had been sent. Within hours, it would reach every inhabited world in the galaxy. On Colony 7, the survivors watched the broadcast together. Mothers held their children. Soldiers stood at attention. Ordinary people wept with pride and relief. On Zorvax Prime, Emperor Call watched the message in his throne room. When it ended, he sat in silence for a long time. His advisors waited for his reaction, but none came. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft and thoughtful. "These humans," he said, "they are not like the others. They truly believe they can win." He turned to his military commander. "Perhaps they can." The galaxy had received its warning. Now it remained to be seen whether anyone would be foolish enough to ignore it. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Colony 7, and the galaxy was not the same. The Zervani Empire, which had stood unchallenged for 12,000 years, was crumbling. The defeat at Colony 7 had shown the conquered species that the Empire could be beaten. It had proven that resistance was not hopeless, and that proof had ignited fires of rebellion across hundreds of worlds. The Valari, a peaceful species of scholars who had been enslaved for 2,000 years, declared their independence first. They were followed by the Korath, fierce warriors who had never stopped fighting even after their official surrender. Then came the Minosians, the Cheldar, the Branth, and dozens of others. Each species saw what humanity had done and found the courage to do the same. Emperor Kal, the Undying, watched his empire fracture from his throne on Zorvax Prime. His advisors urged him to send fleets to crush the rebellions, but he knew the truth. His military was not large enough to fight on so many fronts. Every ship he sent to suppress one rebellion left another border undefended. And always, at the edge of his thoughts, was the memory of what had happened to the last fleet he had sent against the humans. On Earth, humanity celebrated its victory, but prepared for the future. New shipyards were built in orbit around every major planet. Military academies expanded their enrollment. Research facilities worked around the clock to develop better weapons, faster ships, stronger shields. The Terran Federation would never be caught unprepared again. Ambassador Hannah Clark stood before the Assembly of Free Worlds, a new council that had formed from the species that had broken away from the Empire. The Assembly met on a neutral space station that orbited a dead star, chosen specifically because it belonged to no one. Representatives from 18 newly independent species sat in the circular chamber, their eyes fixed on the human woman who had requested this meeting. My people did not seek to become leaders of a revolution, Ambassador Clark began. Her voice was calm and steady, carrying easily through the chamber. When we refused the Empire's demands, we were thinking only of ourselves. We wanted to protect our colonies, our families, our way of life. We did not imagine that our actions would inspire others to do the same. She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. She saw hope in some faces, suspicion in others, and fear in a few. These species had lived under the Empire for so long that freedom was still a strange concept. But here we are, she continued. The Empire is weakened. Its grip on the galaxy is loosening. For the first time in millennia, species that were born into slavery can imagine a different future. And I want to be clear about what humanity's role in that future will be. She stepped forward, her expression serious. We will not replace the Empire. We will not demand tribute. We will not force any species to join an alliance or accept our protection. Humanity believes that every species has the right to determine its own destiny. That is why we fought. That is why we will continue to fight if necessary. A representative from the Valari species rose to speak. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. What do you want from us then? Why call this assembly if not to form an alliance? Because an alliance might be necessary for survival, Ambassador Clark replied. The Empire is wounded, but it is not dead. Emperor Kal still has thousands of ships. He will try to reconquer his lost territories. He may succeed against individual species fighting alone. But together, we might be strong enough to resist. She looked around the chamber once more. Humanity offers partnership, not leadership. We offer cooperation, not control. We offer friendship, not domination. What you do with that offer is your choice. The assembly debated for 3 days. In the end, 14 species agreed to form the Alliance of Free Worlds. 4 chose to remain independent, preferring to trust their own strength. But all of them left with the same understanding. Humanity was not the Empire. The humans kept their promises. Far from the politics of ambassadors and assemblies, Commodore Daniel Cole stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station Alpha, watching Earth turn slowly below him. He had been promoted after the battle, given command of a small squadron tasked with patrolling the border regions. It was important work, but sometimes he missed the simpler days, when he was just a captain with one ship and a clear mission. Admiral Lisa Hartwell joined him at the window. She had received her own promotion, taking command of the Third Fleet after Admiral Morrison retired to a teaching position at the Naval Academy. "Beautiful view," she said. "Always is." Cole agreed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two old friends who had survived a war together. "Do you think it's over?" Cole finally asked. Hartwell shook her head slowly. "No, the Empire will try again eventually. Or someone else will. There's always someone who thinks they can conquer humanity. They see our small territory, our young civilization, and they make the same mistake the Zervani made. And we'll beat them the same way? We'll beat them. However, we have to." On Earth, in a small memorial park outside Houston, the names of every person who died at Colony 7 were carved into walls of black stone. General Nathan Price visited the memorial every week, even though he had retired from active duty. He owed it to them, he believed. He had given the orders that sent them into battle. The least he could do was remember their sacrifice. A young woman in a cadet uniform approached him one afternoon. She was nervous but determined, the same way he had been 50 years ago when he first joined the service. "Sir, I wanted to thank you," she said. "My family was on Colony 7, my parents, my little brother. They're alive because of what you did." General Price looked at her, then at the names on the memorial wall. "I gave orders," he said quietly. "These people did the hard part. They gave everything so that your family could live. Remember them. Honor them. And when your time comes to serve, be worthy of their sacrifice." The young cadet saluted and walked away. General Price returned his attention to the memorial. The stars were full of danger. There would always be empires that wanted to conquer, tyrants who wanted to enslave, enemies who wanted to destroy. But as long as humans remembered the lesson of Colony 7, they would be ready to never cross Terran borders. The warning had been given. The galaxy had listened. And humanity stood ready for whatever came next.